Welcome back to the Null Space. I just read A Whole New Mind by Daniel H. Pink. And this book is about the future, and it's about the kind of people we will need to become to thrive in that future. And one of those types of people is an inventor. I want to talk about how this book has helped me understand a little bit about what it means to be an inventor and how becoming that kind of person will play out in the future. Technology is progressing so fast these days, and it will only increase in speed as AI, automation, robotics, and quantum computing as those industries mature. And I often wonder how we're going to be able to have leverage and sort of maintain relevance and find meaning in the future, given that the present is changing so rapidly. So if we're talking about kind of like the next 10 years, if everything is going to get automated more and more, what skills will be kind of like the last man standing in terms of being productive and providing an impact and giving value to society? What type of person do you need to become to be the biggest contributor? So how do you make an impact in the future that is essentially telling us that it's going to need us less and less? I think the best place to start is to kind of ask the basic question, and that is, what cannot be automated? I think I've gathered like three things that I can think of that can't be automated or can't be replaced by AI. And one of those is anything related to the human condition, anything that helps us understand or helps us navigate the human condition. And I think there's a lot of proof of that. One of them being, religious text, to be honest, or spiritual text. We've gone through so many revolutions in the past 2,000 years. From the agricultural revolution, we've been through so many wars, the industrial revolution, the scientific revolution, some automation, computer, digitized revolution, that even today, after all of that, these religious texts are still relevant to people today because they're about the human. It's knowledge about the human condition, and it's knowledge about how we cooperate, and it helps us navigate our own struggles and how to see other people and understand one another in terms of our species. And it's highly unlikely and very unreasonable that those things are going to be replaced in the few decades by AI. It's more likely that these texts will continue to be useful to many people in the distant future, which kind of tells us that's if we're going to learn a skill that's going to impact the world when everything is becoming automated, it's going to be related to what these texts are helping us do. Now, if you're not spiritual or it doesn't matter, like just anything psychological in terms of helping us understand the human condition is going to be very, very relevant, probably even more valuable in the future than it is today. Secondly is creation. Obviously, inventors are creators. And when it comes to being creative and thinking outside the box, by definition, those things are impossible for computers to do because you can't automate creation. Like you can amalgamate things, you can put two things together to make something new, but it requires those two things in the first place. So far as I can tell, only humans can really probe the unknown and make leaps and bounds, find themselves in uncharted territory where they have no data to fall back from. There's rarely anything that they can use to get to that specific place in the first place. That's really one of the biggest differences, in my opinion, that I see between computers and human beings, is that computers need a lot of data, and they rely on that data to make new things, but it's only new in the sense that it's not in the present moment in any part of the world. Humans, on the other hand, don't really need data as much to work in leaps and bounds and come to new conclusions, because some of those new ideas and those new uncharted territories work from irrational thoughts that just plain guesses. Things that have been created in the past don't necessarily come from lots of data. Sometimes they just come from accidents, and there's a flash of insight that causes or compels somebody to jump to these crazy conclusions and probe that unknown area. It happens in science a lot, but mathematicians, I think, live that reality every day, because that's essentially the job of a mathematician, is to, when they do mathematical research, they essentially are just probing parts of society where they think there's structure there that can be basically conceptualized or understood, and try to use that structure to gain new knowledge about the environment or society. The goal of a mathematician, in a sense, is kind of to expand that scope of what we know. And to do that, they have to learn the skill of trying to understand things with no data. So the science and art of innovation and invention will, I think, in my opinion, be the untouchable skill, the skill for the future. And these three answers are kind of deeply connected to the process of creation and invention. Inventors, they need to make things for humans, and in order to do that, they need to really observe and understand the human condition and what we go through in our struggles. Inventors are also creators, and in order to do that, they have to kind of transcend the current paradigm of how people see things, and the mental models and the frameworks that we use to understand society, to really push those boundaries and limitations of what can be done and what can be known. And then inventors are researchers, and they're research explorers, in my opinion. And they're kind of pioneers in the sense that they're trying to mix things together that people never thought to mix. So in a sense, they're kind of like, they play the role of a mathematician, but they're in a completely different game, but they're doing the same thing. They have the same goal, is to get to unknown territory and try to understand unknown territory. Mathematicians make proofs, and they make new maths and make new structure, like try to understand the structure of reality, but inventors make new products and new things and new industries. And at the core is kind of this war against their own ignorance. And they're constantly trying to go into new territory, and in order to do that, they must kind of have a wisdom as to what they don't know. So the goal is to kind of like locate these boundaries and all my paradigms and all my mental models, and kind of challenge them, and like combine them and amalgamate them, so that I can kind of like break away from that line of thinking and end up in uncharted territory with the mathematicians and the rest of the inventors. And that's essentially what I'm trying to do thus far. So thank you for watching.